As tributes continue to pour from all across the globe at the news of the passing of the founding president of Zambia, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. Tonight, we're joined to reflect on the life and legacy of Kenneth Kaunda by the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. President, good evening and thank you very much for your time. Before I get into maybe what I would like to highlight, let me give you this opportunity for yourself just to reflect on the legacy of Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, his role on the continent, and what you believe will be the lasting impression that he would leave with many on the continent and in the world.
Yes, good evening. Good evening, Thabo. This is a very sad moment for, I think it should be a sad moment for all South Africans, but it's a particularly sad moment for all of us in the ANC because, for over 20 years, our headquarters was in Zambia. And this is at the time when President Kaunda was president of the Republic of Zambia. Very, very close to us, a very important role player in terms of our struggle. And therefore, we can really, truly count him, President Kaunda, as one of the architects of a democratic South Africa. You would remember, Thabo, that during all of these years that I'm talking about, to some of those years, on its west, Zambia had a liberation war going on in Angola, on its western border. On its southern border, a liberation war going on in Zimbabwe, and on its eastern border, liberation war going on in Mozambique. And so it had to carry this battle. That as a forward state, a forward country, in terms of the African continent, standing on the border with all of these liberation wars, Zambia had to stand up and say whatever happened, however much Zambia and Zambians suffered, they had a responsibility to make sure that the people of Southern Africa were liberated. I think President Kaunda, President Kaunda will always stand out as one of these outstanding African patriots, a principal architect and a player in terms of the achievement of that goal that was set by the continent, of the total liberation of the continent from colonialism and apartheid.
Right. When he got the victory in 1964 during those elections, what did it signal for the rest of the continent and all those you have just mentioned who were involved in liberation wars?
Well, I mean, for us, it signaled that we stood a much better chance in terms of the support that we would get on the continent. Because the relations between the ANC and Zambian political forces go back many years. The ANC was a partner with the Northern Rhodesia African National Congress until it was banned, and became an ally with UNIP, United National Independence Party, which President Kaunda led. So some of our comrades were passing through to Tanzania, to Tanganyika then, as it was, we later became Tanganyika, Tanzania. We had to go overland via Botswana land, Southern Rhodesia, Northern Rhodesia into Tanganyika. And they were hosted in Northern Rhodesia by UNIP. So it's an old relationship. So when Zambia became independent, when Northern Rhodesia became Zambia, for us it meant that it really strengthened our positions within independent Africa, because we knew for a fact that Zambia, under the leadership of UNIP, under the leadership of President Kaunda, would continue to support our struggle.
Many young people today will read of this history and this relationship that dates many years that you're talking of, particularly the closeness between the late President Kenneth Kaunda and the president of the ANC, then O.R. Tambo, that led to the ANC being able to exist in Lusaka. How important was that moment in history for the liberation of South Africa that we then saw later on?
Well, Thabo, you'd recall that when the ANC got banned, ANC, PH, and all these organizations, It followed, what followed here was a period of a very, very severe repression within our country, the arrest of our leadership, many leaders, people being killed in prisons and so on. And it was only possible to sustain an organization like the ANC because we had allies, friends, comrades, like President Kaunda, like Zambia. Because then we could still say the ANC exists, the ANC lives, the ANC leads, because indeed it did play those roles, thanks to its possibility to establish itself in a place like Zambia. And so that's a critically important matter. In a sense, you could say we would not have been able to win the struggle for liberation in South Africa when we did, had it not been for the support of countries like Zambia. It would have taken us longer, maybe been costlier than it was, but the fact that we had such firm, fearless supporters meant that we could indeed speed up the process of liberation in the way that happened.
In your engagements with the President Kaunda, he, of course, having established the Foundation for Peace and Stability, what were his reflections, particularly in the establishment of peace and conflict resolutions on the continent?
Well, I think that one of the things that we must understand, Thabo, is that President Kaunda was very, very close to President of the ANC, Oliver Tambo. And indeed hosted Oliver Tambo within the grounds of State House, gave him a house. So they stayed together within the grounds of State House. And it depended very, very closely on what Oliver Tambo said about what needs to happen with regard to the struggle in South Africa. Of course, he had his own independent mind. Sometimes he would take certain positions which we would debate. But in the end, he would come back to the positions that O.R. Tambo took. For instance, in 1989, the Organization of African Unity adopted a document which was called the Harare Declaration, because an ad hoc committee of the OAU on South Africa met in Harare. That document, we prepared that document in Zambia, in very close consultation with President Kaunda. And from the president from Zambia, we went around the region of Southern Africa. So I'm saying he was very directly instrumental in terms of what we actually achieved within South Africa in the end. So for us, definitely, he stood out like this. But I'm saying for the continent as a whole, the continent would always say that we, the continent, set ourselves the task. Many of our countries became independent, but we said it was necessary that the independence, as Nkrumah said, would be meaningless unless the whole of Africa was liberated. That President Kaunda, like President Nyerere, these are the people who stood in the front line of ensuring that that African objective was fulfilled.
The role that he played in having the continent adopt the concept, I suppose, of Afro internationalism and what it means, and how did he express that particular concept?
Well, you see, the President Kaunda, as I was saying, even like President Nyerere, they come into African politics in a situation in which the notion of Pan-Africanism is already established. And what was a critical challenge for them was that they had to ensure that perspective, a Pan-Africanist perspective, was not just a matter of words, but it became practical. And I'm saying this is the critical challenge that President Kaunda, his colleagues, they say, we have a responsibility to make sure that this independent Zambia contributes to the eradication of colonialism and apartheid in our region of Southern Africa. This is what we need to do in that Pan-African spirit. You know that, Thabo, that, for instance, the South African regime then, of course, naturally responded in a very negative way. That is why, in terms of the export of copper, very important export product of Zambia, they had to request Tanzania and Zambia to request the Chinese to come in. That's how that railway line was built between Zambia and Tanzania to reach the port of Dar es Salaam, to export that copper and then take in other imports via that route, because the apartheid regime made sure that otherwise that copper would not move out of Zambia. But the Zambians were prepared to pay that sacrifice. And even the Zambian people, not just the government, not just President Kaunda, they were ready for that sacrifice because they were saying that it's their obligation. I'm saying that within that Pan-Africanist context, to make sure that it had real meaning. Pan-Africanism had real meaning, and they gave it that real meaning.
Yeah. Talk about the concept that you have mentioned, his ideas on Africa for Africans, and the kind of challenge that we are dealing with, for example, in South Africa today, where some citizens in the country are failing to see themselves in the context of the continent being Africans in Africa.
Well, I think it's been Thabo, this has been one of our important challenges, that for a long time, South Africa got cut off from the rest of the continent because of the sanctions, because of the apartheid system, and therefore you had a weakened sense among some of our citizens, a weakened sense of the fact that South Africa was part of Africa. That's why you would get an expression like somebody who, I don't see you for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I say, I haven't seen you for 2 weeks. And you say, no, I went to Africa. As though South Africa is not part of Africa. So I think that we always have a challenge. It remains even today. We still have a challenge to make sure that our people understand this reality, that South Africa is African. That indeed, I'm sure even its destiny, the South African destiny cannot be separated from the destiny of the rest of the continent. We therefore have this very umbilical cord with all of the countries of the continent, and need to respond to the challenges of the continent, understanding that. But it's an important challenge to make sure that our people understand that reality.
President, we appreciate your time, and thank you very much for joining us tonight on In Focus. That's the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, paying tribute to the former president of Zambia, now late at age 97, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. When we continue